Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Sallie Allen. I am the founder of Learn with VR. And at Learn with VR, we build skills and boost confidence by incorporating virtual reality into training. I'm your host for the next 30 minutes or so, but I am thrilled to be joined by Rob Ball, who is a director at Work Horizons. For those of you that don't know Work Horizons, they're a team of 45 coaches and consultants that specialise in supporting individuals and teams to optimise performance and enhance and optimise through change. So I'm particularly pleased that it's Rob joining me today, not only because he's a great talker, but because as a senior HR leader in large organisations, Rob has seen the impact restructuring and redundancy programmes have to, from a business point of view. But now that he's coaching individuals, he's also looking at outplacement services from an individual's point of view and understanding sort of why they choose to embrace an outplacement service. So I guess with that in mind, Rob, can I kick off just by asking you a quick question? What is outplacement service and why do companies invest in it?
Thank you, Sallie. It's great to be here. Outplacement it's been around for a long while, and indeed this year is the 30th anniversary of us setting up an internal outplacement department at Rover Group, which we called Skills Network. So we've been at it a long while. At the time, we were using the services of organisations who would come in, and we were doing large-scale redundancies. They would come in and they'd help the individuals write a CV, perhaps maybe do some interview preparation. What we found, of course, was when you're doing a big sheep dip thing of that sort is fundamentally, if there were 100 people, you were getting the same CV 100 times, more or less, with just the name changed at the top. And that doesn't help anybody, because what we're really about is focusing on the individual. Here is somebody who may well be a victim of circumstance. They're not a bad person, they're not a bad performer. Their skills may be out of date. The organisation has moved on. And there may, of course, be issues around just the financial situation. They're going to be released. We should be doing it as elegantly as possible. And part of that is giving them support to transition. And Work Horizons is fundamentally, at its core, a career transition tool. It's an online mechanism to help people move from a position, whether that's because they're being released or whether it's just because they want to make a big change in their lives. Now, for the organisation, they want the individual to move to a job very quickly, not just because they're nice people and they want the best for them, but also because it reflects on them. They give outplacement because there are a lot of people remaining in the organisation, the survivors, if you like, who are watching. And the messages that they want are, this is a company with a future, and this is a company with a professional and compassionate management team. So when they see their colleagues, they may be feeling guilty because they've survived and their friends haven't, but when they see their colleagues getting levels of professional support, being able to make that transition, it reflects back through that on the organisation. The survivor syndrome, it's called. How can we impress those people? It's really important because the research has shown that in a large-scale reorganisation, restructuring and redundancy program, in the 12 months that follow that restructure, 30% of the people that have been retained, the key people, the people you really want, 30% of them resign. This is putting any business under a severe amount of pressure. Now, what we need is all of the people, and there'll always be a level of attrition, but everybody to think, actually, no, we understand it. It was an inevitable decision. We don't like it. Of course we don't. We don't want anybody to lose their job, but we know why it's happening, and we can see that it's been done in exactly the right way. And that's where we step in and we give that level of support. I mean, as a team, we can help organizations do the restructure and the redundancies and the whole process. Of course, we can do that. But picking up very specifically on the outplacement part, we have the basic tool supported by coaches, supported by disc profiles, and a matrix of different services. And I'm fascinated to see today how we can add to that by the use of something which is really innovative.
Fab. And on a personal note, having experienced time with one of your career coaches myself, I found that the benefit of that was really to give me the headspace and the opportunity to focus on what my next steps could be, and also to do a bit of soul searching about what work really meant to me. So it's interesting to hear you talk about outplacement service as being beneficial for both the individual but also the employer brand. When you're working with people at the moment and they're facing redundancies or they're thinking about a career change, what do you find that they typically need support with?
Some people come with a very, very clear vision of what they want to do. This is their opportunity. And my favorite story, and it's very specific, but a guy who was going voluntarily redundant, and he came to collect his check, and I happened to be there and chatting to him, and he said, "This is giving me the opportunity to fulfill my life's ambition." And of course, I asked him what that was, and he said, "To open a fish and chip shop." And that was just right. And he wasn't taking the mickey. Genuinely, this is what he wanted to do. We always start with why. And there's a book by Simon Sinek of that name, Start With Why. What's the purpose? What stirs you? What would bring meaning to your life? Now, that might sound a little bit left field, because a lot of folk need to find a job and find a job quickly.
Sure.
And I'm sympathetic to that. But if they can actually take this as an opportunity to get something, start a business perhaps, or find a job which really will bring some level of meaning to them, a reason for getting up in the morning, a reason for bouncing out of bed in the morning, wouldn't that be so great? Others come very clearly, I need a job, help me with my CV, help me prepare for the interview. And that's fine. We also do give a lot of support around self-employment as well. I've got a job, an idea to create a job of my own where I'm my boss. And there's a lot of attractions to that. There's a lot of downsides as well. And within all of this, a level of realism is needed. So the why, I want to be, forgive the frivolous example, an astronaut. Yeah, well, let's move away from that. Come back to Earth. And so it's very dependent on the individual, but not just their situation, but where they are emotionally as well.
Sure.
A lot of pressure on. They're losing their job. They're thinking about the ramifications of all of that. They may have a family who are equally as worried. A lot of pressure coming in all directions. And so those people who find themselves in this situation, we can support depending on where they are. And of course, with coaching, it's always about initially find out where the individual is so that you can start whatever the journey is from the right place. But then we work out with them where they're going to.
Great. And that's really where you and I have had this conversation about how can virtual reality complement that coaching, and what sort of services and products are out there in terms of software, then that can complement it. And what I wanted to do initially was just to give a bit of background about virtual reality and training. Last month, Forbes called virtual reality training absolutely one of the winners of 2020 due to home working and due to technology advances. And if you have experienced VR training simulations previously, they might have not felt terribly realistic, or they might have been sort of almost cartoony in the way that they approached it. But because of the advances in video technology, particularly, some of these simulations are now, really high quality and impactful. And running alongside that, the cost of headsets has significantly reduced. So the one I'm going to use today for our demo in a bit, this would have set me back about £3.5K in 2015. And now you can pick one up for about £300. And although some VR simulations and training experiences are built with a standalone position, I very much have the opinion that virtual reality enhances learning experiences rather than replaces, so that it can complement an overall learning experience. But what's the research suggesting? Just want to share this efficacy study with you. It's one that PwC did around soft skills back in 2020. And there were 3 really clear things to come out of that experience. What they did was they put hundreds of their managers through a development program. And they were approaching that training with 3 different delivery styles: e-learning, virtual reality, and classroom. Now, in terms of the time to complete that delivery and that content, VR took a quarter of the time that a classroom experience did. So learners were experiencing the content in about 30 minutes in comparison to 2 hours. But, how good was it? What did they say afterwards? Well, in terms of an improvement in confidence in discussing, particularly in this instance, diversity and inclusion, after the virtual reality training experience, individuals were collectively reporting 245% increase in confidence in comparison to classroom at 166%. So all of that learning delivery was impactful, but it is interesting to see the response to virtual reality. I touched on the cost of headsets, and at £300, clearly it's not a cheap delivery. However, if you're working with organisations that are very large and have the opportunity to scale, in terms of classroom learning, VR training has cost parity at about, for those guys, at 375 learners, and with e-learning at 1,950. So it is scalable, and as the cost of headsets has decreased, has become much more accessible for people. So that sort of suggests and poses a question in my mind about, well, why is that? Why did those learners find VR so much more impactful? And the way I summarize it is here. It reminds me of learning to drive. We would find it very difficult to retain the knowledge just by reading a car manual. But of course, by doing the real thing, by actually experiencing it, we can retain up to 90% in terms of knowledge. And that's the optimum goal of virtual reality. It is to give us the experience as if we are doing the real thing, which is why the VR pioneers were simulators around air traffic control and oil and gas exploration, areas where it's quite difficult to train on the job, but to simulate that experience was so important. Here I've put together some photos here of how we have incorporated virtual reality into learning and development. There's a guy here on the far right who you can see is on a plank. We use this as an icebreaker. It was a off-the-shelf game which we adopted and amended, and he currently thinks he's walking out on a plank about to drop 200 feet, and it very much, the feeling, it is quite terrifying because you're literally walking out of a lift onto a plank. And it was high energy, it was energetic, it was a lot of fun. But also, it was a way of starting to introduce themes into that particular workshop. Now, the image here in the middle is something much more complex. That was a bespoke virtual reality training game that we built. What we were doing there was simulating a pop-up shop environment and taking the customer support team through a program where they'd already engaged in some e-learning and some workshops about how to deal with customers. And here you can see there's a very angry customer, and we're putting into play some of the tools that we'd learnt around empathy, but also it was very bespoke in terms of answering questions about processes for that organisation and what they should do should they come across this kind of customer. The guys in the middle here, they were presenting back some findings. We'd used an off-the-shelf product where they'd played a game where they were listening, and they were given some stats and information about how much, how well they'd listened, and we're just sort of sharing that back with the group. So I guess the takeaway from that is that VR offers you the opportunity to do something very bespoke within learning and development and very specific to your organisation. It gives you the opportunity to inject a bit of fun, and there are numerous applications out there. But how can VR complement outplacement services? So touching back on the great insight that Rob gave us at the start of this, he talked about, the objectives of outplacement service being linked to turning uncertainty into a positive opportunity. People thinking, yes, I can now go ahead and live my dream and buy that fish and chip shop. It's also about that practical support as people are facing changes, in ways that really match their needs, but also, of course, to reduce the stress and workload for teams managing the change, and to signal to the rest of the organisation that you're supporting people who are leaving. So what we've chosen today to show in terms of how VR can complement outplacement services is to focus on VR interview practice. And the reason that we've done this is that it does offer the opportunity to practice interviews, which is part of the majority of people's journey in terms of their next career step. It reduces the pressure to deliver mock interviews internally. And it provides, for me, when I've used it, it provides a safe, non-judgmental space whilst providing feedback, which you'll see in a minute. And it goes back to Rob's point as well that this is a significant investment. So it's signalling to colleagues that we are really supporting people finding work. And in turn, we kind of meet in the middle with this. We feel that the practice boosts confidence sitting alongside the coaching that's happening from it as part of an outplacement service. So I'm going to share with you a virtual reality interview scenario. It'll take me a couple of minutes to set that up. So in the meantime, I'm going to ask Rob if he would kindly just sort of share his insight a little bit around what does make a great interview. If you were coaching somebody, Rob, what would you be talking to them about?
Can I say, first off, that's so unkind putting somebody on a plank. I'd have heart failure. But that's me.
You
right.
wouldn't. It's fun. We'll do it. Well, I'll get you on the plank. It's fun. I promise.
Well, yeah, maybe it'll cure my problem with heights. In fairness, I don't have a problem with heights. I have a problem with the ground. Hitting it from right. Anyway, interviews have to be a conversation. it's a two-way process, and both parties need to understand one another very, very well. The key issue for anybody going into an interview is preparation, because it's the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. This is potentially a great way of preparing and preparing well. One of the key things for me, one of the great complementary factors in this is a lot of what we do, our core product, is online. And I talk about the 4 a.m. syndrome a lot. People who are about to be made redundant or have been made redundant wake up in the middle of the night, and it is typically 4 a.m. and 4 a.m. is the time of the greatest number of deaths in any day. And they're worried, and their mind's racing, and they're extrapolating from, oh, I might lose my job, to I will lose my job, I won't be able to pay the mortgage or the rent, and I'll lose my family, and everything goes downhill from there. What we're about is giving them, in this circumstance, through our respective products, an opportunity, even at that time in the morning, to do something positive and proactive. They can go and look at vacancies. They can go on the job boards. They can look at Indeed, who partner with one of our partner conversation companies, Skilled. They can review their CV because they've got the Work Horizons website, and now they can actually practice being interviewed. They can think about what will be asked of them, and they can think about the questions that they will ask the interviewers. You've got to remember that the key part of any interview is that moment where they say, "Any questions for us?" And too many people say, "Oh, no, you've covered everything." In fact, what they should be saying is, I've done a lot of research, and what I really want to do is ask you a few questions because I'm so interested in your company and the job that is on offer. All of these things build a picture about the individual. And it's not just about confidence, and it's not just about coming across as an extrovert and socially confident. It's about the content and the way, which might be a low-key delivery, but the way that they're putting across their message.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Rob. Really appreciate it. And I'd just like to check that you can see I'm kind of in my headset now.
I can see that.
Okay, brilliant. So I guess one of the things that I do say when I'm doing a demo is that obviously I'm in the headset, so I am immersed into an environment whilst you guys are watching it on a flat screen. So it is a slightly different experience, but hopefully you'll get a feel nevertheless. So it's really important when we first go into these virtual reality rooms and games that we take a couple of moments just to take in exactly where we are, because it does feel a bit strange when you're suddenly propelled into a room. So I ask people just to make themselves feel comfortable. My headset's comfortable, and now I'm having a good look round behind me, and I can see that there's nothing unpleasant behind me, so I'm starting to feel a bit more confident. In fact, these offices are pretty swanky. I think I'd be quite keen to work here. But what do I do? So how do I actually approach what I need to do in terms of the interview practice? Well, this game and this simulation that we're about to do is based on analysing what it is I say, how I respond to the interviewer's questions. So I can hear the interviewer's questions that he's about to ask me, and hopefully you guys will be able to too. I'm starting to look around, and I can see that I've got a clock down here. That clock tells me how long I've been in the VR experience. And the reason that it does that is that, say I have allocated myself, 15, 20 minutes to spend a bit of time practicing, I can see exactly how long I've been in the headset. Now, turn live feedback off. What is this? Well, let's have a look at that. This is reminding me that I need to press start analyze in order to receive feedback on my speech. And this is giving me 3 prompts, really, that my eye contact is going to be looked at, pace of my speech, and also the volume of my delivery. So it's a few pointers that I might like to remember when I start to answer the questions. I'm going to hit begin here. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. So I've started to work with Rob. And let's say that I have been within my current sales position for the past 20 years. So it's definitely a job in sales that I'm looking for. But this individual hasn't had an interview for a couple of decades. So she's very, very nervous about having an interview. And in addition to that, hasn't yet kind of received the sort of support and pointers that Rob was just talking to us about. So actually today, what she's going to do is just dive straight into these sales questions. Now, it is possible with this particular simulation to customize the questions. So let's say, for example, you're working with a particular team and you know the types of jobs that they're going for. You can preload and upload the questions and work with us to have suitable responses and questions uploaded. In addition to that, with their permission, there are some questions which are specific to organisations that they've shared. So if, for example, you're working with graduates who are looking to join Microsoft or Google, Goldman Sachs, those types of organisations, those questions can be preloaded. So you'd go into a slightly different room than the one we're looking at now, but with those preloaded questions. But as I say, I'm here today. I am quite nervous, so I'm going to give some dreadful answers. Let's see what I'm asked from sales, reminding myself to start analyze, feeling comfortable. I'm going to hit begin. And let's see what he asks me.
Why did you choose a career in sales?
Oh gosh, why did I choose a career in sales? So I'm one of 8 kids, and it was really competitive in our household growing up when I was little. So that sort of competitive, sporty nature, I played a lot of sport, sort of propelled me into a sales career because, as I say, just naturally competitive. And throughout my career, the things I have really valued about a sales career is that I get to meet lots of new people, get to work with a bid team, putting proposals together, listening to customers, sort of, really understanding their needs. So yeah, that, being competitive and working with customers.
Tell me about how to sell a product over the phone.
Okay, how to tell you about selling a product over the phone? Well, it's something I've done an awful lot of. As you know, we sell air conditioning units, and I have an awful lot of knowledge about this. But when I'm selling a product, what I tend to do is establish exactly who it is I'm going to be contacting, how long I'm going to take up of their time, explain to them why I'm calling, and then talk about all the features and what's the word? Benefits of that, so that we can, hopefully get to show them. Okay, so I think we've had enough of me answering those questions. So I'm going to hit stop analyze. So I hit stop analyze then. And what Stop Analyze has done is that it's taken my responses, and the AI in the background is now provided me with some insight about how I did. So let's have a quick look, starting from the top. My eye contact room split. You could probably see that the headset was prompting me to look more to the right because I was very much leaning into the left side of the room. My eye contact was actually pretty good. So I was making deliberate points to, at deliberate points to lean in and to make good eye contact with them. And you could hear, I mean, I only spoke for 1 minute 56 seconds there. So ideally you would have at least 5 minutes worth of data. But you can see that in terms of really long, drawn out pauses, I had 3 of those. So for this to register as a hesitation, it needs to be quite a dramatic pause so that the other people feel it. And that happened 3 times. So given that I only spoke for a couple of minutes, obviously one of the areas where I would really need to improve was actually not only having thought what I was going to say and the key messages that Rob talked about, but on my delivery in terms of hesitation. So that's eye contact, room split, my actual eye contact, and filler words. Now over here, I was actually speaking, relatively quickly, 127 words. It's given me a good speaking pace here, but I think at times, I think it's, that could definitely be improved. My voice loudness, that was generally pretty good. I wasn't quiet at all, but I did possibly, when I was hesitating, get up into more of a loud range. But my listenability in terms of conversational English, I deliberately didn't bring in any sort of jargon or terms that were just, for internal use. So I've got a pretty good listenability score, although we know that obviously there was some hesitation and that my speaking pace, could have been a bit better. Now, what is really impactful at this point would be to think about 2 things. Over here, we've got something that's called keyword count. On this occasion, because it's the first time that we've done this, to demonstrate, some poor answers, this keyword count could allow me in future to put together with Rob a list of keywords that I would really like to mention in my interview. Things that I think the particular role is looking for, or things that would demonstrate my experience and, complement my message. So that the next time that I practice, I would have some information here about my keywords and whether or not I had used them in my responses, again, to help with that practice. As I mentioned earlier, you can play yourself back, and really this is one of the biggest learning points, I think, from this experience. It can be a bit cringy initially, and you have to work with people to make them comfortable enough in order to play themselves back. But when they do, they can really hone in on what they'd like to say next time. And when they feel comfortable and they've done it a few times, actually upload that speech so that, again, you can just listen to it in preparation for an interview. Now, I'm going to show you the capability here of progress. So if we go into progress, what progress can show us over a period of time is how we improve in all those key areas in terms of pace, hesitation, volume, and over time, obviously, we'd hope to see that gentle improvement, and also reminding us why these core areas are so important. We can upload some notes, and if, for example, we knew that as part of our interview, we were going to include a presentation, you could actually upload a presentation and the slides and directly practice those slides. So I'm going to go out of the demo now and just very quickly just share with you, if you're working with people on skills other than interviewing and you're interested, please do pick up with me about a couple of these other communication tools. We've now entered into a room, and I'm certainly getting sweaty palms because there's 92 people looking in front of me. This simulation does actually allow you to put your transcript on, so that what you would be saying in your speech or your pitch or your presentation, it analyzes it, and you can turn on some quite cool features in terms of audience questions, but also disruptions, people's mobile phones going off. So different type of scenario, and not exactly complementary to outplacement services, unless somebody is going to be doing, a huge pitch as part of setting up their own business, perhaps. But just wanted to show it you to just introduce you to some additional communication tools, because I particularly love this one. It's really good fun. And likewise, there are other meeting rooms, like I mentioned. If perhaps part of your interview is presenting to a lot more people, you can see on the left-hand side the ability to actually upload your presentation slides. So I hope that has given you enough of an insight initially. I'm just going to take my headset off for a second.
Sallie, that was brilliant, thank you. But how readily do people take to it? Because it must be a initially disconcerting experience.
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. And the majority of people quickly adapt to it, which is why saw me mention about icebreakers earlier. I like to do things where people have just had a short experience with it, which is when you're onboarding with the interview skills, you can just do a couple of minutes like we just did then. But then obviously, take people through it for a longer period of time. Occasionally people will say that they don't like it and they feel a bit funny. So, there will be, for some people who just don't like that lack of control of being put in a really immersive experience when they're actually, sitting at home or in the workplace. But generally, people's first reaction is, oh my God, wow, it feels like I'm there.
Because you made a whole range of highly valid points, but one of them very early on, you said a lot of people haven't had an interview for 20, 30 years. They've as long as they've worked for an organization, they've just moved around because they were shuffled, and they may have had a chat with someone, but they haven't had a formal interview. And even today, the interview remains the predominant selection technique. Managers still believe that they have some form of brilliant insight into personalities and therefore can make the selection. You're absolutely right. I think more and more people are using a presentation. Come in and do a 5-minute presentation first on this topic, whatever it is. And the ability to have rehearsed it is invaluable. The whole process must build confidence. Even I hate watching myself back, by the way. I never do. And much as I love myself, I find it really disconcerting. But if they can overcome that and recognize that is how they talk, whatever their accent is, there's nothing wrong with any accent, only our preconceived thoughts around it, our prejudgments around it. This is a chance to really make an impact. And that's what you're trying to do. You might not be the best candidate, but you can make the most of the skills and experience that you have by putting it across in a way which makes a connection. And you did use that word, and I absolutely picked it up and underlined it mentally. You're about making a connection. Those people want somebody that they're interviewing to be successful. This is a time-consuming, costly process. They want somebody to make that connection. And it can be you. Now, it might be that someone else is really good at making a connection, but if you're not, they've won. You've got to be at least as good in terms of connection, presentation, your personal characteristics, and then you overlay that with skills, experience, knowledge, the background that you have. Where I also see this as being invaluable is, and I did touch on it earlier, with different personalities. Being shy or being an introvert must not preclude you from getting a job. We live in a society where we reward extroverts too much. we miss out on all of the talent. I mean, 50% of the people, it's actually probably 52% of people, are more introverted than extrovert. That doesn't mean they're not socially confident, and it certainly doesn't mean that they are in any way less capable. But they do need to be able to portray and describe and sell, if you like, all of those strengths.
Yeah,
if they can properly prepare.
I think that's a great point, Rob, in terms of giving people the opportunity to bring their best self to an interview. It is difficult to just prepare your answers into the ether of the questions that you think you might be asked. And I think one of the things that is so beneficial about experiencing questions in that room and having that insight is that it gives you the opportunity to make those little improvements, which even if you don't get the job, you know that you've given yourself the best opportunity, as opposed to, I did a poor interview, but I was a really good fit for that role. If you're committed and you're motivated and you're going to practice, you just walking into that room with so much more confidence. And honing in on those particular areas, which we all know about, and certainly with the coaching will obviously going to be discussed and tools given to help with that. It's just putting it forefront in your mind, because you're not walking into your first interview. It's actually maybe your fifth or sixth, because you've done some great practicing and some great thinking about what what you're looking to say and how you want to say it.
And those examples, because so many of the people who were on this session have interviewed many, many, many times and get very frustrated because the individual has got so much to offer, but they can't get it out. And so, tell me about your experience, blah, 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 blah. Now give me examples. And suddenly they go blank. That move from, I know what my job is, to I know how well I do my job is a huge leap. And if through this preparation, be it one-to-one coaching, through reading articles on our website, but having great questions we use with your technology, they will go in already thinking, right, if they ask me about Project Y, I can talk about this. If they ask me about my presentation skills, I can talk about the conference I was at, and. And it gives that three-dimensional view. And that's what virtual reality is. It's a three-dimensional view. And that's what the interviewers want to see. If it was two-dimensional, they'd read the CV and say yes, no. It's what else there is to that person. And I do say to people, actually be awfully useful if you could apply for a few jobs, get some interviews just for the practice. Jobs you don't necessarily want, although you may find that you do want them when you're in the interview because it's two-way. But there's nothing like practice and rehearsal. Well, this is a great substitute for that. So, and it's probably the law of somebody that the first interview you get is the job you really, really, really want. And you don't have the experience of lots of interviews before, unless you've done something like this.
Well, great to hear you. I'm glad you've enjoyed that demo, Rob. I guess one of the questions that people do ask is sort of, how does it work in practically? How does it actually get kind of set up? And Paul has just asked a question about some people are very nervous of networking. Could this be a useful tool? That's a great question. And there are products available within virtual reality training whereby you're in a space and you're sort of mingling, and you can choose which room it is, whether it's a conference or more of a kind of party setting, and you drop in on what they're saying, and you can look at both how you listen to what they're saying, but also practice the kinds of things that you want to say about your business, or the kind of questions that you want to ask them. So yeah, I think it can be a useful tool for that, definitely. Back to communication. Virtual reality works well in terms of enhancing and practicing communication skills.
And you can certainly see that. That's Paula's question's a really good one. I mean, we all should have really well honed elevator pitches. The 30-second one, the 60-second one, the 5-minute one. Brilliant opportunity, isn't it? I mean, and to just feel comfortable in yourself. It's a huge thing to get to, because he even stood up in a room of 10 people at a networking event, which did used to happen pre-COVID, and see those people, and they're all looking at you, and sometimes that's really quite an intimidating situation. And instead of being smooth and honed and professional, we just we allow our tics and minor aberrations in our style to take over, where we can smooth these out. We can reflect ourselves, not reflect our nervousness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and having that some of those
you
specific...
also mentioned was key words.
Yeah.
We get people to reflect on the job profile and any other communication, and companies send lots of bump through sometimes, and you've got to give them back the words that they are giving to you. If you're not saying I'm an engineer, if you start talking about being a technician, they don't understand it. And by the way, even before interview, that's key, because so many organizations now use artificial intelligence to do the first sift. So, and a machine doesn't know that the word technician and engineer are synonymous. So if you say I'm a technician when what they're really looking for is engineer, you'll be automatically rejected. There's a lot about the language of the organization, and giving the interviewers a sense that you will be a cultural fit. There's a lot. This is layered upon layered upon layer, and we're never going to find a simple route to all of this, but we can find that we can improve, and we can hone, and we can practice, and we can get to a point where we're confident in ourselves.
Definitely. And what we try and do with that is to make the whole process as easy for people as possible. So, just to summarize, what Rob's been saying, learners replace old habits, they feel more confident generally, and they get better at doing interviews, which increases the odds that they'll be successful, when it really matters. And how we make that easy for people is that we send out actually one of these mobile headsets, because all you need to do is pop your phone in the front of it and download an app, and then you're using the virtual reality from within the headset, but also the sound and camera from your own phone to record and to send through for the analysis. So we post one of those mobile headsets out to somebody, which is ready to go once they've downloaded the app. That gets delivered to them, but we then do a virtual one-to-one onboarding setup just to ensure that people are comfortable and motivated to enjoy their VR experience, and that they know what to expect. And at the very end of the demo, I showed you an impact report. So all the way through, every time somebody uses the training rooms, the analysis can be, with the permission of the learner, captured so that we can create an impact report highlighting achievements and progress. And again, this is very useful for coaches like Rob to really hone in, not only to say, okay, let's, we still probably need to improve in terms of how quickly you're talking or your use of your keywords, but also to say, you know, well done, you know, just look at this improvement and how you've done in terms of eye contact. So that, in summary, kind of is how the process works. Okay.
We've actually got a couple of questions from somebody other than me, burbling along. And our colleague Christoph Goebel asked, can the technology also be used outside of the training purpose in live environments with multiple participants, and potentially with avatars to reduce bias during an interview?
Can we unmute? Sorry, who was that, Christoph?
That was Christoph, yeah, from Skeel.
And Christoph's question was asking, could this be used during the interview process?
I think he's taking it wider than that and talk about live environments where there are a number of people. So can we connect, or is this a standalone process, one person at a time?
Okay, sure. So what I've demoed for you today is very much a standalone product. You can obviously have multiple headsets and people individually engaging at the same time. Now, there is software out there that, from a collaboration tool point of view, we've seen a real uptake in people using that for meetings, particularly where you've got huge numbers, you know, in the hundreds of people attending, where generally through things like MeetSpace, you're able to attend an event using your headset to meet other people and, as you say, take on the persona of an avatar, or alternatively just through your screen, so it's not quite as an immersive experience. But yeah, I mean, there've been a number of products come to market, certainly in 2020 in response to the pandemic, so that sort of collaboration and meeting technology, you know, really excelled.
And the second one we've got is from Rick Cowling. Does the AI allow for feedback about the content of an interview answer, e.g. to rate how somebody answers a question about, say, how they've successfully managed a team?
Yeah, so what can be enabled is sentiment analysis. So we need to be talking for at least 5 minutes, ideally 8. And then the AI can analyze very much the kind of tone and content. So, for example, what it will hone in on is, from what you've said, how likely that is to be received in terms of clarity, but also as a impactful and kind of high-ranking comment. So, in other words, it's analysing the nuances of whether or not your speech is full of lots of unnecessary words, as opposed to the proportion of ones that are clear, concise, and impactful.
I'm looking at the clock, and it's with 4 minutes to go. So I don't know if there's any other wise words for us.
No, I guess I appreciate that in that demo, I was only talking for a couple of minutes. If this is something that somebody's interested in seeing a little more of, then, please, contact me directly, and I can always arrange something that's, more bespoke to somebody's needs, and send out, further information if that's useful. A big, huge thank you to you, Rob. Thank you so much for your insight about outplacement services.
Pleasure.
And the role coaching, in particular, is playing with that. As I said at the start, having personally experienced that career coaching and personal coaching from one of your team, you know, it gave me the confidence to try something that I really needed to think through. And I don't think without that one-to-one, I might have been probably not brave enough to do it. So, you know, in terms of coaching, I can, you know, speak with passion that, you know, it absolutely impacted my life.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that, and it's brilliant the direction you're going.
Well, as I say, if I can help anybody, please, you know, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks very much. Have a great afternoon, everybody.